How you doing? How you doing? My name is David Ocasio, also known as David, and one of my other nicknames is known as Sober Gang. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. People actually call me Sober Gang. All right. Now, part of the gang is that we get straight to business. You feel me? And one of the businesses that we do is when anyone anywhere reaches out for the hand of AA, we take responsibility. All right. So we're gonna jump into the 12 steps, 12 traditions, and if you want to hear the 12 steps read by a brown-skinned Afro-Latino dude who was born in Oakland, reps Alameda and lives in Oakland and works in Oakland with the California surfer swag vibes. Go ahead and keep listening, man. Go ahead and start your dishes. Go on a walk. We're going to run through this book. I can read, okay? And I'm going to prove it, all right? Step 1. We admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one, of course. Every natural instinct cries out against the idea of personal powerlessness. It is truly awful to admit that, glass in hand, we have warped our minds into such an obsession for destructive drinking that only an act of providence can remove it from us. No other kind of bankruptcy is like this one. Alcohol now becomes the rapacious creditor, bleeds us of all self-sufficiency and all will to resist its demands. Once this stark fact is accepted, our bankruptcy is going, human concerns is complete. Our bankruptcy as going humans concern is complete. All right. But upon entering AA, we soon take quite another view of this absolute humiliation. We perceive that only through utter defeat are we able to take our first steps toward liberation and strength. Our admission of personal powerlessness finally turn out to be firm bedrock upon which happy and purposeful lives may be built. We know that little good can come to any alcoholic who joins AA unless he or she has first accepted his or her devastating weakness and all its consequences. Until they so humble themselves, their sobriety, if any, will be precarious. Of real happiness, they will find none at all. Proved beyond doubt by an immense experience, this is one of the facts of AA life. The principle that we shall find no enduring strength until we first admit complete defeat is the main taproot from which our whole society has sprung and flowered. When first challenged to admit defeat, most of us revolted. We had approached AA expecting to be taught self-confidence. Then we had been told that so far as alcohol is concerned, self-confidence was no good whatever. In fact, it was a total liability. Our sponsors declared that we were the victims of a mental obsession so subtly powerful that no human willpower could break it. There was, they said, no such thing as the personal conquest of this compulsion by the unaided will. Relentlessly deepening our dilemma, our sponsors pointed out our increasing sensitivity to alcohol. An allergy, they called it. The tyrant, alcohol, wielded a double-edged sword over us. First, we were smitten by an insane urge that condemned us to go on drinking. And then by an allergy of the body that ensured we would ultimately destroy ourselves in the process. Few indeed were those who, so assailed, had ever won through in single-handed combat. It was a statistical fact that alcoholics almost never recovered on their own resources. And this had been true, apparently, ever since man had first crushed grapes. In AA's pioneering time, none but the most desperate cases could swallow and digest this unpalpable truth. Even these last gaspers often had difficulty in realizing how hopeless they actually were, but a few did. And when these laid hold of AA principles with all of the fervor with which the drowning sees life preservers, they almost invariably got well. That is why the first edition of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, published when our membership was small, dealt with low-bottom cases only. Many less desperate alcoholics tried AA, but did not succeed because they could not make the admission of hopelessness. It is a tremendous satisfaction to record that in the following years this changed. Alcoholics who still had their health, their families, their jobs, and even 2 cars in the garage began to recognize their alcoholism. As this trend grew, they were joined by young people who were scarcely more than potential alcoholics. They were spared that last 10 or 15 years of literal hell the rest of us had gone through. Since step 1 requires an admission that our lives had become unmanageable, how could people such as these take this step? It was obvious. It was obviously necessary to raise the bottom. The rest of us had to hit to the point where it would hit them. By going back in our own drinking histories, we could show that years before we realized it, we were out of control. That our drinking, even then, was no mere habit. That it was indeed the beginning of a fatal progression. To the doubters, we could say, perhaps you're not an alcoholic after all. Why don't you try some more controlled drinking? Bearing in mind, meanwhile, what we have told you about alcoholism, this attitude brought immediate and practical results. It was then discovered that when one alcoholic had planted in the mind of another the true nature of this malady, that person could never be the same again. Following every spree, he would say to himself, maybe those AAs were right. After a few such experiences, often years before the onset of extreme difficulties, he would return to us convinced he had hit bottom as truly as any of us. John Barleycorn himself had become our best advocate. Why all this insistence that every AA must hit bottom first? The answer is that few people will sincerely try to practice the AA program unless they have hit bottom. For practicing AA's remaining 11 steps means the adoption of attitudes and actions that almost no alcoholic who is still drinking can dream of taking. Who wishes to be rigorously honest and tolerant? Who wants to confess his faults to another and make restitution for harm done? Who cares anything about a higher power, let alone meditation and prayer? Who wants to sacrifice time and energy in trying to carry AA's message to the next sufferer? No. The average alcoholic, self-centered in the extreme, doesn't care for this prospect unless he has to do these things in order to stay alive himself or themselves. Under the lash of alcoholism, we are driven to AA. And there we discover the fatal nature of our situation. Then and only then do we become as open-minded to conviction and as willing to listen as the dying can be. We stand ready to do anything which will lift the merciless obsession from us. I'll say the last sentence again. We stand ready to do anything which will lift the merciless obsession from us. We stand ready to do anything which will lift this merciless obsession from us. Obsession is the curse. We become like stalkers to alcohol. We gotta go wherever it's at. Marijuana, drugs, alcohol, sex, pornography, nicotine. There's many addictions out there. If you suffer from anything close to addiction or alcoholism or obsession to use something, chemical dependency, get treatment because this is a fatal illness. Rest in peace to Nathan Fisher. With that being said, that was step 1 inside the 12 and 12. We'll be back for step 2. Tradition 1 in the 12 and 12. Many people know about the big book. For some reason, less people know about the 12 and 12. The 12 and 12 goes hand in hand with the big book. And as I just read step 1, I'm going to skip toward the middle end and find tradition 1 and read it. Let's go ahead and jump in. Tradition 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. Let me say that 3 times. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. What does this mean? In the words of a California, Oakland, Alameda guy, we can't be too loosey-goosey as a group, or not a single one of us is going to stay sober. Let's jump in. The unity of Alcoholics Anonymous is the most cherished quality our society has. The lives of all to come depend squarely on it. We stay whole, or AA dies. Without unity, the heart of AA would cease to beat. Our world arteries would no longer carry the life-giving grace of God. His gift to us would be spent aimlessly back again in their caves. Alcoholics would reproach us and say, what a great thing AA might have been. Does this mean some will anxiously ask that in AA the individual doesn't count for much? Is he or she to be dominated by their group and swallowed up in it? We may certainly answer this question with a loud no. We believe there isn't a fellowship on earth which lavishes more devoted care upon its individual members. Surely there is none which more jealousy guards the individual's right to think, talk, and act as they wish. No AA can compel another to do anything. Nobody can be punished or expelled. Our 12 steps to recovery, our suggestions, the 12 traditions which guarantee AA's unity contain not a single don't. They repeatedly say we ought, but never you must. To many minds, all this liberty for the individual spells sheer anarchy. Every newcomer, every friend who looks at AA for the first time is greatly puzzled. They see liberty verging on license, yet they recognize at once that AA has an irresistible strength of purpose and action. How, they ask, can such a crowd of anarchists function at all? How can they possibly place their common welfare first? What in heaven's name holds them together? Those who look closely soon have the key to this strange paradox. The AA member has to conform to the principles of recovery. His life actually depends upon obedience to spiritual principles. If they deviate too far, the penalty is sure and swift. They sicken and die. At first, they go along because they must. But later, they discover a new way of life. They really want to live. Moreover, they find they cannot keep this priceless gift unless they give it away. Neither they nor anybody else can survive unless they carry the AA message. The moment this 12th step work forms a group, another discovery is made that most individuals cannot recover unless there is a group. Realization dawns that he is but a small part of a great whole, that no personal sacrifice is too great for preservation of the fellowship. He learns that the clamor of desires and ambitions within them must be silenced whenever these could damage the group. It becomes plain that the group must survive or the individual will not. So, at the outset, how best to live and work together as groups became the prime question. In the world about us, we saw personalities destroying whole peoples. The struggle for wealth, power, and prestige was tearing humanity apart as never before. If strong people were stalemated in the search for peace and harmony, what was to become of our erratic band of alcoholics? As we had once struggled and prayed for individual recovery, just so earnestly did we commence to quest for the principles through which AA itself might survive. On anvils of experience, the structure of our society was hammered out countless times. In as many cities and hamlets, we reenacted the story of Eddie Rickenbacker and his courageous company. When their plane crashed in the Pacific, like us, they suddenly found themselves saved from death, but still floating upon a perilous sea. How? Well, they saw that their common welfare came first. None might become selfish of water or bread. Each needed to consider the others, and in abiding faith, they knew they must find their real strength. And this they did find. In measure, to transcend all the defects of their frail craft, every test of uncertainty, pain, fear, and despair, and even the death of one. Thus it had been with AA. By faith and by works, we have been able to build upon the lessons of an incredible experience. They live today in the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, which, God willing, shall sustain us in unity for so long as He may need us. Tradition 1. Each member of Alcoholics Anonymous is but a small part of a great whole. AA must continue to live, or most of us will surely die. Hence, our common welfare comes first, but individual welfare follows close afterwards. This is the long form of Tradition 1. Each member of Alcoholics Anonymous is but a small part of a great whole. AA must continue to live, or most of us will surely die. Hence, our common welfare comes first, but individual welfare follows close afterwards. Tradition 1. Alcoholics Anonymous, read by Sober Gang. Thank you very much.